Okay, in this video we're going to go over the 2.2 notes on analyzing conditional statements. So we start with vocab. So a conditional statement is a logical statement that has a hypothesis and a conclusion. So an example would be, the classic example is just if P then Q. Okay, so that's a logical statement. So for example, if it rains, I will bring my umbrella. If it rains, then I will bring my umbrella. It's probably a better way to state it. So that would be an example of a conditional statement. The hypothesis is the if part of the conditional statement, but it does not include the if. Okay, so instead of having if P then Q, let me actually put a statement in there. Okay, so let's we'll do something a little fancier. So let me just get rid of this, and I will say if it rains, then I will bring an umbrella. Now you can type yours, and I highly recommend that you type it. So the hypothesis part is going to be this part. It rains, done. Okay, that's your hypothesis. So it doesn't include the if. It follows the if. So the hypothesis is it rains. Okay, then the conditional part, which we will underline with a different color than this. How about with blue? Okay, then I will bring an umbrella. Okay, so that's the conclusion. So the conclusion is I will bring an umbrella. Oops. Okay, and usually when we do the conclusion, we underline it twice. Okay? So notice that the hypothesis has no if, and notice that the conclusion has no then. Okay, key points. Okay, if you perform a negation means that you negate, that you make the opposite of the original statement. So if you wanted to say P, then not P is the negation. Okay, and if you had Q, then not Q is the negation. Okay, we're going to talk about that on the next slide. Okay, so that's your first part of your notes. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, converse, inverse, and contrapositive are ways to express the conditional statement. Okay, the converse, when you have the converse, I always think about Converse sneakers, and I always tell myself we're going to walk backwards. So watch what's going to happen. We're going to exchange the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, so that means if P, then Q, you would change it to if Q, then P. So let's change our original conditional statement, and that conditional statement, going back one, was, if it rains, then I will bring an umbrella. So write that backwards. So if I bring an umbrella, then it will rain. Okay, that's your converse. So I switch the P with the Q. Okay, let's go to the inverse. Okay, so let's do some underlining here also. So now what is your hypothesis? So at this point, we'll take pink. So if I bring an umbrella, so I bring an umbrella is the hypotenuse, hypothesis now. And the conclusion is, it will rain. Okay, that's the conclusion. Remember, in both cases, I did not grab the if or the then. Okay, that brings us to inverse. Okay, inverse has to do with the negation, so I'm going to put this little negation sign. So you negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, so go back up to the conditional statement. So going back to the conditional statement, I will bring an umbrella. If it rains, then I will bring an umbrella. So if you negate both, you would say, if it doesn't rain, then I will not bring an umbrella. Okay, so I negated both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, so the last type of change we can make to the conditional statement is the contrapositive. So the contrapositive is when you both create the converse, where you walk backwards, and the inverse at the same time. So what's that going to look like? Remember what your original statement was, or what my original statement was. If it rains, then I will bring an umbrella. So I would say, if I don't bring an umbrella, then it will not rain. So that's taking the statement, writing it backwards, and then negating each part. Okay, so let's underline here as well. So my hypothesis is I don't bring an umbrella, and that hypothesis is negated. And my conclusion is it will not rain, and that's also negated. Okay, so contrapositive, big word, you do two things. You take the converse and you take the inverse. Okay, let's keep going. So we're going to go to the next page. Okay, so the if-then form, that is just a statement that has a hypothesis and a conclusion. Good. So this is basically a conditional statement. Conditional statement. And as you're taking these notes, feel free to type, because you have that option. I don't have that option right here in this recording. So if-then form is a statement that has a hypothesis and a conclusion. So let's do another statement. Okay, how about, let me change color. If it is Monday, then I will go to school. Okay, so that's an if-then statement. That's a conditional statement. Okay, and what are the parts of the conditional statement? Well, the first part is the hypothesis. It is Monday. And the second part is the conclusion. I will go to school. Okay? So we've also learned how to do the inverse. You negate both. The converse, you say it backwards. And the contrapositive, you negate and say it backwards. Okay, equivalent statements happen when two statements are both true or both false. They throw in a definition of perpendicular lines. I think it's because in the textbook they have an example like that. So these are perpendicular lines. They form a right angle. This is not really germane to our discussion, but it's in our notes here, so I thought I would just tell you what that is. We have already worked with perpendicular lines. Okay, next page, we're going to be able to go through some examples. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take a statement and write it as a conditional statement. So let's do that now. Okay, example 1. Rewrite the conditional statement in if-then form. So here's a conditional statement. All birds have feathers. I want it in an if-then form, which is really the traditional form of a conditional statement. So how about if I say, if a bird, no, let me not do that. If an animal is a bird, then it has feathers. That's a conditional statement in your if-then form. Look at the next one. Two angles are supplementary if they are a linear pair. So I'm going to take the if and start there. So if two angles are a linear pair, then they are supplementary. Okay? Okay, and the last one here, all Great Danes are large dogs. So I would say, if an animal is a Great Dane, then it is a large dog. Okay, so look over these, be able to write a statement as an if-then conditional statement. Okay, we have a little bit more to do for notes, and again, I'm telling you, type them because it's so much easier. Okay, so example 2 tells us, write 4 related conditional statements. So we're going to start off with an if-then. So first it says, write the if-then form, the converse, walking backwards, the inverse, negating, and the contrapositive, doing both, of the statement. Okay, so guitar players are musicians. So let's see what we can write with this. So I would say, sometimes using the word you helps you. So if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. Okay, we're also going to decide at the end whether these are true or false statements. Okay, the converse of that, walk backwards. If you are a musician, then you play the guitar. Okay, we're going to go to the inverse now. Now, to make the inverse, you're going to go back up to the conditional statement and you're going to negate it. Okay, if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. All right, so I just negated it. Okay, let's go one more. Okay, so now the contrapositive. Go back up to the original, write it backwards, and negate it. So if you are not a musician, remember we're going backwards, then you are not a guitar player. Okay, so those are the 4 types of statements. Now, let's talk about statements that are equivalent. So they're either both true or both false. So let's look at the first one. If you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. That sounds true. So this one's true. Okay, the converse. If you are a musician, then you play the guitar. I think that's false because maybe I play the trumpet. I'm still a musician, so this is false. How about the inverse? If you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. So again, maybe I play the piano. I am still a musician, so that statement is false. The contrapositive. If you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. Okay, that makes sense. So that's true. So what we're noticing is the conditional statement and the contrapositive are equivalent because they're both true. Then the converse and the inverse are equivalent because they are both false. Okay? So I have only one more example here. So let's do that now. So same idea. Write 4 related conditional statements. First, we're going to write the if-then the converse, then the inverse, and then the contrapositive. Okay, good counsel students take 4 years of math. So the if-then would be if you are a GC student, then you take 4 years of math. So that's my conditional statement. Okay, let's do the converse. So go back to the conditional and write it backwards. If you take 4 years of math, then you are a GC student. Okay, 2 more statements. Okay, the inverse. Go back to the initial conditional statement and negate both. So if you are not a GC student, then you do not take 4 years of math. Okay? And one more. It's the big one. So you've got to do both the writing backwards and the negation. So look at the original statement. If you write it backwards, you would say, if you take 4 years of math. So negate that. If you do not take 4 years of math, then you are not a GC student. Okay, so I wrote it backwards and I negated it. Okay, so this is the information you need to have. And as I said, it's easier for you to type it. You want to be able to form these statements. You want to be able to identify your initial statement, which we call the hypothesis, and your final statement, which we call the conclusion. Okay, so this ends these notes. We're going to do one more activity, and then I'm going to assign the homework. So make sure you have all these notes nicely written down so you can refer back to them.